I'm a leprechaun.
Oh, hey, I like your little leprechaun outfit, in honor of St. Patrick's Day, right?
It's St. Patrick's Day? But in all serious, yes, it is St. Patrick's Day, at least when I'm filming this. It probably won't be anymore when I get this uploaded. But yes, it is St. Patrick's Day, and go Pack Go. This video was sort of half unplanned. I was obviously going to make this video at some point. It was just depending on when I would get this season watched of Survivor. My parents finally got curious about the show and started watching it with me, so it made the viewing of this season go by quicker as we were watching it more routinely. For this reason, this season already has a special meaning for me, but from a subjective viewpoint, this season was by far one of the best of the pre-All-Stars age, let alone the entirety of the classic age. The contrast between the Morgan and the Drake tribe when it comes to sheer quality is awesome, and almost everyone is a memorable and great character, even the unlikable ones. At least they weren't bland. Survivor Thailand. The pirate theme was simple but sweet, and even and the Outcast twist was something new brought to the show. Yet it didn't interfere with the flow of this season as much as I feared. This season is definitely no Marquesas or Outback, but it's definitely up there. Also, I've pretty much just kind of decided that from now on, I am just going to do the Survivor videos in two-parters. When I finally get to Survivor All-Stars, I'll probably do that one all in one go, which will be kind of a lot. But mainly that's because it's 3 tribes, and I don't know if... I feel like the video would be too short if I split it into 3 parts. So, that's that. This is going to be part 1, if you probably couldn't already tell, because the thumbnail obviously only focuses on one specific tribe. But that's just kind of the lay of the land, how I'm planning on making these videos like this in the future. But anyways, you know how we do things here. We're starting off with the losing tribe, which is, of course, Morgan. Duh. Honestly, I do feel like Morgan gets a bit of a bad rap. Like, I remember I watched a video by Prettium. Shout out to him. I do shout outs to Prettium all the time. He's the reason I started making Big Brother and Survivor videos, if I'm being frank. And honestly, yeah, in one of his videos, he did one of his videos, like the worst Survivor tribes of all time, and he was doing it off of, I don't know what he all did off of, but one of the points that he was doing this off of was percentage of competition, of challenges won and lost. And I'm pretty sure Morgan was up there because Morgan sucks. But honestly, I feel like Morgan is a little bit underrated. I mean, for one thing, the 2 tribes went into the merge even numbers because Morgan did win some things. And Morgan made it to the final 2. So, if we're looking at it with, like, final placement, Morgan's up there with Tambaki and Rotu, which are tribes that are much better. And when it comes to placement, Morgan actually is better. When it comes to placement, Morgan is statistically better than tribes like Pagong and Kucha. I could go on. Those are 2 weird examples. But anyways, I'm stalling. And we're starting with number 8, and it's Nicole Delma, of the Morgan tribe. And Morgan was, from the start, obviously the losing tribe. They were all over the place, and they weren't good about managing their tribe mates, even though that could have been hard to do with the Outcast twist and all. And for me, the worst member of the tribe was Nicole Delma. Why? Because she's the first boot. That's the only time... And the only time I've ever not put a first boot at the very last of their tribe ranking was John Raymond in Thailand, for reasons that I state pretty clearly in that video. But Nicole seemed to actually have a pretty strong asset to the team at first. But what led to her demise was something that had never happened before. You see, most first boots up to this point went either because they weren't doing their part, like Ryan from Amazon, or Peter from Marquesas, or because they were physical detriments, like Sonia from Borneo, or Deb from the Outback, or Diane from Africa, or they were just straight up unlikable like John from Thailand. But Nicole was voted out for a strategic reason. She was relatively young and fit, and she didn't come across as a bad person at all. What did her in was that just before the first tribal council, she campaigned to get Tawana out. for some reason. Well, Tawana was pretty well liked within the group, and this got back to Andrew, who was the appointed leader of the Morgan tribe, and he set his sights out for her, pinning her as untrustworthy. What's interesting is most people on this tribe were targeting Ryan, Skinny Ryan, as he's called, because he was a physical detriment. And he did catch some votes that night. So it is interesting. It was probably one of the most surprising first boots. Probably the most surprising first boot in a season of Survivor that I've seen since... there are a couple. John was a little bit surprising, but yeah, no, definitely very surprising. Now, I'm not saying that Austin could have necessarily won this season had he not become the first Survivor contestant to ever quit, but he definitely would have gone much further. He started off as one of the big guns in Morgan, helping them almost win several challenges, keyword being almost. But the intensity of the game and his surroundings, and a very misunderstood Pelican, got to him very quickly, and he soon was willing to throw in the towel just like that. He pleaded before almost every council for his tribe mates to vote for him, but they never listened, and I don't blame him, because he's kind of whining, and he still seemed to be of use for them. Finally, after the Outcast twist sent Morgan to council one last time, he finally got his wish, and when Jeff realized that everyone was on board, he just snuffed his torch right then and there. What I wonder is what would have happened had Austin not quit there. This is one of the things that always runs through my mind whenever I think about Survivor, which is a lot. And I always think about just how seasons would look if something else happened. And I might do a video on this. And about this specific scenario, where if Austin had not quit at this point, I think chances are either Tawana or Dara go here, but I couldn't tell who between them would. From there, I think Austin doesn't do very well in the merge, but he might make it a few episodes in, but he would likely get eaten up by Drake, like what sort of does happen anyways. Skinny Ryan, as they called him, I really liked and rooted for him at first. He reminded me a lot of Rob Cesternino, which is kind of weird, and so because of that, I was hopeful that he might go far. I got vibes from him that he was a mad thinker and that he could really get into people's head, just like Rob Cesternino. Those two are, now, after watching this season from beginning to end, I find that those two are completely incomparable, and my hopes that he would go far are wishful thinking. Like I said, he's supposed to go at the first tribal council, but after Nicole's gameplay gone wrong fiasco sent her packing instead, he lived to see another 3 days. However, that's all he'd get because Morgan sucked, like we have already said, and they didn't pull out a win to give him more time to redeem himself of his past failures. By then, the only one on his side was Lil, and that's not saying much, but hey, at least he didn't go on a unanimous vote, not counting his vote, of course. There was nothing wrong with Tawana at all. She seemed nice and was responsible in challenges and around camp, and even though her tribe was constantly going to council, she was always safe when she had people like Skinny Ryan, Lil, and Austin on her tribe. She made it to the merge, and along with Lil and Dara, she evaded certain pagonging by teaming up with Burton and John from Drake to pick off the other Drakes that they didn't like anymore. Well, Sandra didn't like this at all and took T out on a stalking adventure, and they overheard Burton and John's plans to turn on T and the other Morgan ladies at some point. For Tijuana, she was sort of there one moment, gone the next. She was that episode she was eliminated, which I was like, huh? I think really what it came down to is there was still some loose loyalty between Sandra's side of Drake and Burton and John's side of Drake, and they're like, all right, let's unite one more time to get T out, and then we'll just continue to kill each other. That's pretty much how it went down. So I wouldn't say that Tawana was robbed necessarily. I'd say she was just kind of a victim of the natural process of Survivor. But I do think she does deserve to come back, because she'd probably do much better than she did here. Jeez. Where do I even begin with Lil? She started off as the oldest member of Morgan, and even though she wasn't the weakest, she wasn't the strongest link either, and she would often leave her teammates wondering how she even became a scoutmaster in the first place. She was initially voted out 3rd overall, but came back after the Outcasts voted her back in, and now I think is the best time to explain what this twist was all about, because for people who have never seen the season, which first of all, if you haven't, why are you watching this? I'm literally spoiling the entire season, but if you haven't and you're are watching this, let me explain what the Outcasts twist is. On about day 19, I want to say, the 6 previously eliminated players came back as outcasts. That's what they named themselves, at least. Now, the 3 tribes competed in a prison break comp similar to the one in Thailand, and the rule was that if the outcasts finished after one tribe, but before the other, the tribe that came in last would have to vote one of their own out. And the outcasts would get to vote one of themselves in. But if the outcasts beat both tribes, then both tribes had to go to council, and outcasts voted 2 in to keep the numbers even. Well, the outcasts did come in first, and honestly, yeah, it just seemed like so too good to be true. Like, almost like, watching this, anyone who hadn't seen it before would be like, oh, I have a feeling that they're going to come in first, because that's just what would be the most dramatic. But anyway, so the Outcasts did come in first, and they voted in Lil and Burton, and this is where the game gets very interesting for Lil. So now she's in the merge, and suddenly her lack of skill in comps doesn't really matter anymore, because now that it's every man and woman for themselves, it just doesn't, she's honestly sitting pretty. But what does matter is that she's at a crossroads. Does she stick to the remaining Morgans, Andrew, Rhino, Tijuana, and Dara, who screwed her over initially, or does she flip to Drake? And the numbers are even now, so whatever she does will tip the scales. Well, she ends up siding with the remaining Drakes, and by the next episode, she's in an alliance with Burton and John. Yet, it seemed every week she was still a wild card. Every episode, someone from the other tribe was picked off, alternating from Drake to Morgan, and considering she was always in a swing vote position, she had to have some taken control. Then at the final 5, while John and Burton are messing around, Lil makes an alliance with Sandra and Dara, and I just want to point out, the way I said that makes it sound like Lil was the one that formed it. She was just kind of part of it. This breaks her free from her past alliance and sets her up well to make it to the end. But at this point, nobody wants to take her to the final 2 because she's too likable. And now she's at the final 3, and it doesn't look very well for her. Then she wins final immunity out of nowhere in a performance so impressive, I would have probably voted for her on that alone. Now, her final tribal performance wasn't the worst, but she was still up against someone too good, and Lil ended up losing by a vote of 6-1. Some may call her the original Purple Edit, but Dara has more moments than you probably remember, especially near the end of the game. Like Tijuana, she was never really in a position to be voted out before the merge, and yeah, it looked like she might get voted out as like the 2nd or 3rd juror, but then she teamed up with Burton and John, and they took her pretty far, even if she did lose Tijuana along the way. Then, right before the power shifted for the millionth time, Dara went on a pretty convenient immunity streak, winning 3 times in a row. However, it was the final 4 immunity that didn't go over well for her, and most Survivor aficionados will know what I'm talking about. This is a very weird final immunity challenge. It was a trivia challenge at Tribal Council, and it was a lot like the Fallen Comrades, sort of. It had a feel like that. It wasn't that necessarily, but it was a lot like that. But the jury was taking part in it. And if a player won, they just have immunity like normal, but if the jury won, nobody would get immunity. This is what ended up happening. So, the jury did win, so anyone could have gone. John was hot on the trails of losing... John was hot off the trails of losing his number 1 ally, and Lil was too big of a social threat to take any further, and the whole first half of the finale builds it up like one of them would go home, But then they look at Dara, who's no longer sporting the immunity bandolier, and they all proverbially lunge at her. She was a somewhat underrated player, and I think she's a prime candidate for a second chance too, because she could really build on her first game. Now, I saw this guy for the first time in Second Chance, and his gameplay wasn't as good as it was in Pearl Islands. He was the decided leader of Morgan, but he was no Michael Scoopin. The rest of the tribe openly suggested that he take the wheel. And he was a fine leader. He kept the morale up, as hard as that was. Nobody ever thought about going rogue on him until Lil blindsided him at the merge. Yes, Savage was in a good spot right up until the merge, and then Lil flipped and he got voted out as the last pre-juror. A shocking end to one of the most iconic players of this season. Yet I wonder what the season would have looked like had Lil stay loyal to Morgan, because once again, this is how my brain works. And honestly, I think they'd all stick together, and Pagong Drake, which I just can't even fathom that. Then at the final 5, Lil, Dara, and Tawana form a girls' alliance, and Get Out Savage, and then Rhino. Dara wins final immunity and takes T, and from there, I think Dara wins on gameplay while T does get some votes for likability. You know, I don't know why, but this dude was always my favorite from Morgan. He just seemed really smart and strong and just kind of like a cool cat. Almost, I guess my best way to describe him is like he's like Matthew from the Amazon, but not weird. And I just had this, it was one of those gut instincts, kind of like with the other Ryan. I just had a gut instinct that this dude could make it really far. He just seemed like a likable guy, and even though he does pretty well in the hypothetical ending I just explained, he doesn't do too hot in real life. He makes it to the merge, but after the Savage blindside, he was basically a sitting duck, or a sitting pelican, should I say. And production didn't even try that hard to hide the fact that he was going. I mean, at least he did make it to the jury. That's gonna do it for this video. Oh man, look at the time. I have to go to play practice soon, and I was not expecting that video to be that long. I am so sorry. This is what happens when you veer too off script sometimes. I have a marked propensity for doing that very often, and I should stop. Anyways, like, comment, subscribe, be on the lookout for the Drake video. That's what I'm calling it, and I'll see you later.